creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk. If we're looking at having a great guest and looking at what does it take to be great, welcome Karl. You want to know about AI? Karl knows AI. Karl Yeh, correct?
Yes.
Oh man, I knew I'd get it right on the last time. Thank you very much for joining me on Shed Talk.
Oh, thank you. It's awesome to be here. And yeah, I actually just met you today.
And that's the beauty of it, because I didn't do any research on you, obviously, and everything about you. And then you're doing so much stuff.
Yeah, a little too much, I feel sometimes.
What do you think's a little too much?
Well, I feel like during a day, I don't feel it's work. It's just it's a passion to do it. So I get up and I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited about what I'm doing, some of the stuff that, is going on, and whether that's, strategy development, marketing, demand generation, AI, whatever it is I'm doing, I'm pretty excited about it.
Which is your most exciting part?
It's the artificial intelligence side.
Oh, okay. We gotta dive deep into that.
Okay.
So tell me, I'm gonna ask you a really funky question here. Everybody has a moment in time, that one fork in the road, or that one moment that changed their life, that you got introduced to things. It was like, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
Yeah.
So the question comes in.
Yeah.
When was the first time you saw AI?
I'm going to actually roll this back a little bit.
Okay.
So when I was young, I can't remember how old, 7, 8, 9, in that range. I actually was living in Vancouver at the time, and we had a family road trip to Calgary. And I was bored because it was all adults and I don't have anybody to play with. So my dad's like, here, play with this. So it was a little chess board, but you played against a computer. And it's the very first time I ever played chess, and I didn't know what I was like, what am I supposed to do with this?
How long ago was that?
Oh, I don't know. It was probably in the 90s sometime. And I didn't know how to play chess. All I know is that thing would continuously beat me over and over and over again. So that was the very first time. Like, it was like, oh, okay, that was interesting. I thought that was fascinating. Fast forward, so probably early 90s. Fast forward later 90s. I don't know. I was grades, like a little bit grade school still. I remember watching on TV IBM's Deep Blue beating Garry Kasparov. Like, I don't know if you remember when the computer actually beat a human chess player. And I was like, and at that point, rewinded back to wait a second, that was kind of neat. And I'm sure the technology improved from the time I played to whatever that was against an actual chess master. I'm like, oh, fascinating. So that was like a point in time that I remember in my head. And, after that, got through high school, went through university. Actually, my career path was so different, like to what that was, but that was still ingrained in my memory. Fast forward to 2016. This was when DeepMind, a similar situation, created what's called AlphaGo, beat a human player, one of the oldest board games.
Is it like on Jeopardy?
No. It was it was just in the news, and it was just I just remember reading about it, and I saw it, and that triggered all the memories coming back. It's like, wait a second, my dad, computer chess, Garry Kasparov. It's like, now I want to pay attention, because it felt a little closer, and I can actually do something about it. Back then I couldn't do anything about it. Now I actually started reading more, got more interested. Listened to Google's I/O presentation 2016, where they talked about natural language processing, machine learning. Got a little bit more interested, started reading up about it. But you couldn't still really do anything unless you actually was in that field. And I was in the marketing field. So I was like, I can't really transfer some of that over. And I also started getting into video production, and that. So kind of was put on a little bit of a back burner. But then 2018 happened, And I saw Sundar Pichai, again, Google I/O, where that really sparked. He was on stage and he was demonstrating an AI calling somebody. I think it was a restaurant, and it was a conversation between the AI and the real person. I was like, that has to be going somewhere. So I read up about it, started, playing with some of the tools. A little disappointed because some of the tools were like, I can't do really anything with this, whether it's an image generation, text generation. It was still really off. And just like everybody, I kept at it, but it was more of like as a hobby, just kind of played with it. I was actually really into more blockchain, Web3, crypto too. So got into that. But then, just like everybody else, November 22nd, or November 2022, when ChatGPT came out, and at the same time too, Midjourney 4 came out, and when you actually use these tools, everything connected from the time my dad gave me that chessboard all the way to the time to here is like, that's it. That's the connection. And this is actually something that is usable. And I felt like this has implications across the world. And from then on, we saw it just explode. And here we are today where things are rapidly evolving faster than anything we've ever seen.
So the question then, I'm going in there, that aha moment, okay, that all of a sudden as a kid, you've seen this, you're building that together. Then the next thing, years later, this comes in. Then all of a sudden that connectivity, the fork in the road, then all of a sudden, when you all of a sudden was able to put that piece together,
Yeah.
that emotional feeling,
Yeah.
could you sleep? It was like you just found the cure to whatever that was, and now you have to get it out there for yourself.
Yeah. And at the heart of what I am is a builder. And I told, here's an interesting thing. So I told a VP of mine, I said, to learn more about me, there's this movie. For the life of me, I can't remember. It had Guy Ritchie in it. It was a movie in the 90s. I shouldn't be watching it. I think I snuck watching it. It was a movie about, or no, sorry, Guy Pearce. Movie about these people, and I'll tie it all back. Sorry, this is a really interesting. So it's about these Union soldiers. It was a movie about Union soldiers. They got lost. They ended up in a cave, and because they couldn't do anything, they essentially resorted to cannibalism. Magic Cave, they actually gained powers from it. So how does that translate to me? A, I'm not cannibal. But what I felt connected to that thinking back is, for me, I like to consume a lot of knowledge, consume it, consume it, consume it. But in addition to consuming, I want to implement whatever I'm learning. And as soon as I get the fix of, hey, this is actually working, I want to consume more knowledge and implement. Consume and implement, consume and implement, consume and implement. Combine that with me wanting to be a builder. I think you can kind of piece it together. Once I saw AI, I want to consume more, implement. And then also looking at the possibilities and the benefits to help people, businesses, and the way it can change the world. That was it. That was the rocket point for me. And I'm like, that's got me excited every day.
What's the scare factor with AI?
There's a lot, but I think it's not the scare factor as is the unknown. I feel there's a lot of like people, it's like, hey, it has big implications for the world ending. I don't see it that way. I see it more of like, hey, if you're not aware, this could actually, it could take your job, right? It has a fundamental shift in economy, fundamental shift in how we go to work. It has a major fundamental shift how we learn. Because if you think about it, a free tool, it's free. You have the ability to get yourself a Harvard education. You can program to be like, I want, you know, economics 101, give me an outline or course. You can learn. And then from that learning, then you can apply. But then also some of the tasks that we do from a job perspective, it can do. I just feel though a lot of people, for that to happen, everybody has to have knowledgeable about that. And I feel that knowledge isn't, not everybody has the knowledge beyond the superficial. I'm just gonna create content with it. Right.
Right. And you look at it like in society, how society changes over the years, like horse and buggy. I think
For
I've
sure.
even talked about that. Horse and buggy started here. We
Yeah.
did. And then, yes, when the vehicle came, did it create jobs or lose jobs? Well, yeah,
Of
you
course it
bet it
did.
did. Now, here we are. Fast forward to today,
Yeah.
AI, where it's coming here, where it's the things you know that you don't know. Well, we don't know where it's going to go.
No, we
We
don't.
don't know what the opportunities are until we actually look at it and go after it.
Yes.
I was talking with people with the in AI. I say, "Oh my gosh!" And when I first saw it on November, I went, "This is a brilliant." Well, let's put the math together for it. So if there's 100,000 people that saw AI for the first time, oh man, this is going to take a lot of jobs. There's only going to be 1% out of that, 50,000 that say, I'm going to try it. Then after the 1% of that
Yeah.
are people that are actually going to implement something that works for them.
Correct.
So the first time users, first time guys. So if you're reading it in the paper, it's already too late. And that's where you're coming in here and creating companies, as in whatever that is to you, to take AI to the next level.
Yeah.
What does it help with businesses?
So the one thing that I'm noticing, when you mentioned horse and buggy, you mentioned some of the major technological innovations in history. Now, think of those innovations. They appeared over time. So it's like when the printing press happened, people had time to get used to it. So imagine the printing press happened, the computer happened, internet happened, and compress all that within a year, 2 years. That is AI because that's how fast it's moving. So I believe there's a gap right now, and then that gap is growing. There's a gap between people who are using AI regularly, frequently, versus those who use it infrequently or don't use it at all. And the problem there is because AI is moving really, really fast, faster than most people think, the people who are using it frequently are up to date on the latest things, whatever that is. And as those things pop up, it's exponential growth. So they stack on top of each other. So the people who are using frequently are up leveling their skills daily, weekly. The people who aren't using it frequently, they're still at the, hey, how do I prompt to actually use this? That's to me a problem because now the very few, like you said, there's only 1 or 2%. So OpenAI had their dev day a couple of weeks ago. They said there's about 100 million people using ChatGPT every week. Cool. How many of those are ChatGPT Plus users? I don't know. What? Conservative estimate,
What's a plus user?
the one who pays $20.
Okay.
So Plus user, you get the benefits of the better model by like 100x, 10x, 100x up to there.
What's a better model?
So for example, you have ChatGPT, which is 3.5, trained on 170 billion parameters, right? So think about 17 gigs of data. GPT-4, which you can pay for, is trained on 1.7 trillion pieces of data. That's around 44 gigs of data, plus 6 months of human feedback. So the reasoning skill, the logic skills, if you've ever compared the two, vastly different in the type of answers you're going to get. So the people who have this, of the 100 million per week, how many people would have GPT plus? Say 20%. Let's say that's a pretty,
The 80-20 rule.
yeah, 80-20 rule. Of those 20%, how many of those are really active and really, really engaged in AI? Let's say half of that. So of the 100 million, there's actually not very many who are taking advantage of the full capabilities, right? And back to my percentage of the gap. That gap is growing because people don't have time to, one, educate themselves because it's moving too fast. All the AI, the tech firms are all in an AI arms race, so they're just releasing tools. There's no education around them. So for example, Microsoft Copilot was announced. Where's the education on people to use it? When Duet came out, for example, in our company, it was released to people. But was there an actual education on it? There was nothing with Google. There was nothing within our company. It's just, hey, go use it. But that's a problem because if you have kind of barely used AI before and someone says, hey, you got to try this Duet with Google. What is Duet? What am I going to use it for? And then it pops up. You're like, I don't know what this is. I have work to do. I have family. I have things to do. Besides the people who are curious, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do anything with it. So again, back to the gap. There's an education gap that people need to be educated on, not just how to use it, but like, hey, how can it set your future? How can it set the future of your business? How can you reap it? How you can reap the benefits? And not hypothetical, oh, companies soon will be able to. No, like, how can I reap the benefits today? What are the tangible things that I can do with AI today that go beyond just using ChatGPT?
And what's really interesting about this, from my experience sharing, is that with my company, and I was talking with Jeff Bradshaw,
Mm-hmm.
and just the other day, and then yourself, going, I keep going back to things you know that you don't know. And,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the questions I always ask, I said, you know what? Yes, I'm busy. I'm doing this. Yes, how's it going to help my company, or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
storytelling is to myself?
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that I found is that all of a sudden, you know what? I need somebody that can actually guide me, hold my hand through it. I don't need to read it, go through it, practice it, and do it. Show me and tell me what it is. Now I ask other people, well, and everybody has an opinion.
Sure.
Okay. Everybody, oh, this is how it is. We all assume this. And I'm going,
Yeah.
wait a second. There has to be that somebody knows from zero to hero, that's not techie, that can actually guide me and say, it's not just to write script.
Yeah.
There's more to it than just writing script. And to get to that next level, like you said, the premium, how do you get to that level? Well, I'm going to buy it and now I have to practice
Mm-hmm.
it by actually bringing somebody in to talk about, well, did you know that you can actually do
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And then, so we Google stuff. I go on and I'll Google something. And then I get lost.
Yeah.
And it's actually having that conversation back and forth and going, wait a second, bring it down, dummify it. AI for Dummies.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a book like that right now?
I don't think so. But you know what? Probably somebody will use AI to write said book.
Huh. Well, I think you know what? How it can't take us that long. AI for Dummies. Here you go. The
There
first
you go.
five
Yes.
steps
Yeah.
of how to take it to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to see how people in society won't take it. The entrepreneurs will
Mm-hmm.
and do it. But from my experience, I need to have somebody show me,
Yeah.
teach me, and go with it because it's today's response, not tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's moving so fast.
Yeah. I think what you're seeing, we know what we know, right? We know what we don't know, or we don't know what we don't know. And with AI, what I'm finding is you have to show people and businesses what are the possibilities and then allow them to think of, hey, how can I apply that example or those examples to my business, to my department, to my team? And that's to me the more effective way to because I wanted to show them, you show them, for example, how to do AI automations, the opportunities with AI chatbots, the opportunities to, I don't know, fine tune models, the opportunities to take your prompting, advance the prompting. So there's so many different things that you can show a company, but once they start connecting the dots, they are the ones who have to think about these things. Whenever we do a presentation to a business, there's no way I know about the business. They know about the business, but I feel I just need to show them some possibilities, and then that's when I can see the gears turn. Like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Yes, you can do it, and this is how you can do it. Let's pilot it out to make sure it fits with you. Make sure there's human review. Make sure it's safe and it's ethical in terms of like whatever the situation is. But it's that business that has to really take that step themselves by
And that
thinking about the possible. For me, I'm just opening that door. They have to step through it.
Right, and that's just asking ourselves better questions and drilling down to ask
Yeah,
the better question that actually helps each company out to ask a better question, or an individual, because this can be an
for
individual
sure.
journey as well, to say, how do we go through that whole thing, to take us to that next level. You had just mentioned right now about being ethical,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and making sure it's human. Are there like five or three most important questions to ask ourselves when using AI? Is it ethical? Is it has a human contact?
Mm-hmm.
And you use two there. Is there actually a formula to that you actually use to say, okay, these are the guidelines that you use?
I think that's dependent on the type of business, dependent on what their has to align with their missions and values and how they portray. Because the I could say, hey, these are the guidelines at Benevity. These are the guidelines at Brookfield. These are the guidelines at whatever company. But when people are using AI, just like anything other tool, they align to what the business wants them to do with it and how they set the guidelines for those things. I think some things that the two big questions that I usually ask is, when you're using AI, is your data like when you're inputting whatever it is you're inputting, what's your data policy? What's your privacy policy? Like, does your employees know that you maybe shouldn't put private information in there or client information? And then where is the data stored that you're putting in? Like, if you're going to use a custom chatbot, if you're uploading all these sensitive informations, do you know that the said custom chatbot has a separate server? Is your company comfortable with that? If not, then maybe there's a better solution. Or if your company is, that's okay. Then you know the risks, you have the tolerance. I think that's also, there's a tolerance level too. It's like, how risky do you want to be? Do you care if the models train on your data? If not, then okay. If yes, then we got to work through it. And that's where I'm more of, I just provide this information and it's the company, here's my recommendation, here's what it is, but you make the final decision based on your tolerance, based on your own policy.
So what would you call training on data? What does that mean?
So, like a large language model, like a ChatGPT, a Claude, a Bard, requires data to be trained on so they can provide the prediction for the next word or whatever you're asking it. Well, where does this data come from? From the whole corpus of the internet. But also, as you can probably see, a lot of artists and people are suing these companies because you trained on my data without my permission. And then there's the counter argument, well, it's fair use, it's online, so why shouldn't, that's a really great thing for me, especially in the art perspective, is let's say you or I were in a room for a week and all we're doing is looking at, let's say, Picasso pictures, how Picasso is drawn, just for a whole week. That's all we did. And then somebody at the end of that week said, hey, you've never drawn anything before, but I want you to draw your representation of a field or whatever, or a subject. Go. Wouldn't you think you'd probably draw it in the style of Picasso because you just spent a whole week immersing yourself into that? Think of a large language model doing that times how much faster, but everything. So now the question is it actually, like, that's what the copyright questions and everything that's being published right now. That's kind of the big issue.
Interesting. I'm looking at this as that, using that example, as you get to write your own narrative. Okay. So let's say, as an example, here we are, we're going to sit in here for a week and we're going to discuss strategy.
Sure.
And our strategy is about whatever that strategy is we want it to be with our corporation or whatever companies we own and do. And so we talk that strategy.
Yeah.
We're all 6 of us here or 5 of us here are talking the strategy of that particular one company. Then all of a sudden we put it out there and we get to write the whole narrative on ChatGPT. Oh, I'll use ChatGPT. Or
Sure.
You'll educate me as that we're going through this. And then that narrative is going to be like, the day you wanted to see a red car, okay, you see a red car every single day. Okay. If you never thought about buying a car, advertising and marketing, you know this inside and out.
Yeah.
As in marketing. Is this the same thing as that we get to control the narrative of ChatGPT? We're going to force it to go down this way because we're only going to show it this side and then times it by 1,000. Is that kind of the concept of that?
Well, I think that's another argument, and this is where you start going into open source, you go into closed source, is who is who sets the parameters of the training, right? Who sets the values, who sets the guardrails of that training, right? Because a lot of these models, they won't answer certain things. And rightly so. The last thing you want to do is these models telling you how to build some sort of destructive device or whatever that can wreak havoc. But at the same time, this is where I'm definitely not a political guy. I'm not like, but when you start getting into those kind of arguments, like how come it's not answering me these type of questions, but I want to know, and then people start injecting, well, like this is this viewpoint, this is against this viewpoint, and that's the question: is like who sets these viewpoints, who sets these guidelines? Is it just a few? The argument for that is that like if it's just a few people who do it, they have a better chance to protect people versus open source, which is like, hey, we're going to train it, but allow anybody to use this. No guardrails, away you go, right? And the community will protect itself. So there's that dichotomy. It's like, okay, which is better? And there's pros and cons of each, and they're always going to argue for it. I think that that's kind of where that's going.
So what about the government stepping in?
So I don't know if you saw the the hearings when they put up like tech heads of tech, Zuckerberg or whoever, and there's always jokes and memes about them, right? It's like, who are these people that are asking these asinine questions? You're like, really? You asked that question? I feel the knowledge that the government or our elected officials have is as limited or even less than the general population of what AI is. And because AI is moving so fast, for them to even understand it is a challenge. But then for the government to actually create laws that are in line with it, that's an even bigger challenge. And I think that's a danger too, because I do believe there has to be some sort of regulation on this, right? Because there are some dangers. We're not talking like doomsday dangers. We're talking like the example of the mother who heard a cloned voice from, or a daughter cloned voice from her mother or whatever. It's like those kind of things where people can start impersonating people and then doing malicious things with that impersonation. There has to be some sort of regulation. There has to be some sort of way, hey, that's wrong. Like, here's the punishments for that. Here's like like those kind of things, like misdeeds. Like, how would you create laws for that? But to create laws, you need elected officials who are knowledgeable. But how do you get them educated when you're also having a trouble educating the rest of the population? So that's the quandary that we have right now.
I got to ask a one here because it's happened with the board being changed over.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to explain a little bit about that? You probably do you know about a little
Yes,
bit about?
yeah.
Oh, please do.
So now I'm not the expert at this. I think between like the third Friday to the Tuesday of that weekend, if you were on X or formerly Twitter, it was like the biggest soap opera, and you're just keeping refreshing, following the certain tech journalists and then the people who are reporting on the news. So, quick recap: Sam Altman was fired by the board. Reasons unknown. Speculation is they found something he didn't tell them, whatever it was. The OpenAI, like, and then they started looking for different CEOs. They found one, but then the staff at OpenAI, I think 95% of them threatened to quit. Long story short, he came back, new board, like all in a span of like 5 days.
And you think about that as an entrepreneur, we grow up with everything that we do, and you look at here's a guy with a lot of power.
Yeah.
Because your board's supposed to have a lot of power, and then he's able to come back and dictate the power. It's like,
Yeah.
well, that was kind of interesting.
It's interesting, and the way that their board was set up was a little bit different because it didn't have a fiduciary duty, it had more of a nonprofit duty, and it was just a little bit different. But it got you thinking. It's like, okay, what was most boards, if they're ready to relieve their CEO, usually have a plan to hire a new CEO, usually have a communication strategy on how to do it. This doesn't play out on Twitter, right? This does not play out in the media. So you'd have to think, say, something set this off. And I don't know, sometimes when you boil down to it, it's like an ego, like some of the greatest conflicts in the world, some sort of ego thing or some really dumb reason. So that was my first thing. It's like, really? There must be some sort of clash or whatever. Then there's speculation about like, hey, is this, AGI, artificial general intelligence, that may have pressed, like they may have found something that they didn't tell the board. So there's a lot of speculation. And even there was a Verge article that was written yesterday where the reporter talked to Sam. They didn't get anything, like, because there's supposed to be an independent committee review of why this happened. I just think the whole thing, all I know is since he's going to come back, and last March 2022, 2023, he made a comment I didn't really catch on, and it actually connected now. Sam said, we could, with these models and the things that we're producing, we could test it in a bubble, and a bunch of people, insiders, like Silicon Valley people, can test it, and then we release it. Or we release it to the public and let them test it, and then that initiates rules and regulations. Two very divergent thinking, pros and cons of both. I know for a fact, now that he's back, I would feel we're gonna the the pedal's gonna be put even further down, and we're gonna accelerate, and AI is gonna go even faster. Because now, if you think about it, well, he has all the leverage, and if that's what he thinks, he wants to bring these things out. Wouldn't you think that there's stuff are gonna come out even faster now? Because there's a lot of stuff that they're working on. You can kind of piece it all together with some what their employees say, what he says, and there's a lot of speculation, but I just feels like they're gonna put out new stuff. It's gonna force Google, gonna force all the other players to push, and everything's gonna be accelerated.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Karl, thank you very much for being on Shed Talk. This was outstanding, and the things we know that we don't know.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you know. Shed Talk.